Hello and welcome to Pratik Chess Videos.
Hey test friends, today we are going to see the game between Morphy and consultants in the year 1858. Well, for those not familiar with Paul Morphy and this game, Morphy was probably the greatest chess prodigy of all time. After learning chess in New Orleans, he was soon the stronger player of his city. In 1857, he won the first American Chess Congress, and the following year, he embarked on a world tour in which he soundly defeated the greatest competitors that the world had to offer, notably Adolf Anderson. During that tour, Morphy was invited to play to the Paris Opera to play with the Duke of Brunswick and Count Isar. And at the opera, they played a casual game that was destined to become one of the most famous chess games of all time. So let's start the game. Well, now e4 seizes the center, frees the bishop and queen. e5 equally good for same reasons. Knight f3, the knight develops with tempo, attacking e5 because the king's pawns are undefended on e4 and e5. Attacks and counter attacks are possible, and the game is sharper than after d4, d5, and the queens defend the pawns, slowing down attacks. d6, well, this is a dubious move. Black defends e5, but this move blocks the bishop on f8. This opening the Philidor defense is not bad, but it is considered inferior to knight c6, which defends the e5 pawn without blocking the bishop on f8. Knight c6. And then d4. Morphy plays the most active move, freeing the bishop on c1 and attacking the pawn on e5. Bishop to g4, it's a mistake. Black uses a tactic, a pin on the knight on f3, which cannot move without losing the queen on d1 to defend the pawn on e5, but the tactic is flawed. It was better to play into d4, although white's position is much better. Into d4, queen into d4. But bishop to g4 was played, and then d into e5. Morphy has an idea to win a pawn, and then bishop into f3. This is the only way to avoid losing a pawn on e5, but it helps Morphy develop the queen and create threats against f7. Well, if d into e5 was played, which is a mistake, yep, recapturing the pawn, then queen into d8 check comes. Now trading queens at the right time, and then king into d8. The only legal move, therefore the best move. And then knight into e5. By trading queens, Morphy would unpin the knight on f3 and allow it to capture on e5. And after bishop into f3, queen into f3, that was played in the game, recapturing and activating the queen. So now d into e5, regaining the pawn, and then bishop to c4. Morphy develops the bishop and threatens checkmate with queen into f7, mate. Knight f6. Black develops the knight and stops the checkmate on f7. Can you now find a move that creates two threats for white? Pause the video and think. Queen to b3. Good move. Morphy attacks f7 and b7. The arrangement with the bishop on c4 being supported by the queen on b3 is called a battery, a lineup of two linear pieces. So now queen e7. Black can't defend both threats, so black defends the more dangerous one, the attack on f7. Black also has an idea to trade queens when Morphy captures the on b7, but the queen is now blocking the bishop on f8 and it is hard for black to develop the kingside pieces and castle. So now knight to c3, Morphy develops a queen and stops queen b4, trading queens. If queen into b7 wins a free pawn, this also looks like it traps the rook on 8, but black has a defense. Queen b4 check. This check trades queens. White is still winning, but Morphy wanted to keep attacking and not choose this path, which trades queens, making it harder to attack. Alright, and well, guess what? There's a trick with bishop into f7 check. Good move. This is a very nice trick which wins more material. So now queen into f7 and then queen into b7. After capturing on f7, the black queen can no longer reach b4 to trade queens, which means there's no trick to save the trapped rook on a8. So bishop into f7 was better than the game continuation, but still knight c3 and then c6. Black finds the best move. This move allows the queen to defend the pawn on b7 and the pawn defends the squares b5 and d5 so that the knight can't advance to these squares. Now if queen b4, then bishop into f7 check. So c6 and then bishop to g5. Morphy develops his last minor piece. Minor pieces are bishops and knights. Makes a pin on the f6 knight. It can't move without allowing white to capture the queen on e7 and gets ready to castle queen side. One move accomplishes a lot. So now b5. It's a mistake, although it's hard to suggest a good move for black. This proves to be a mistake because Morphy's move on the next move is very strong, but it's hard to develop any black pieces. Well, knight a6. White can take the knight with bishop into a6 and break up black's queenside pawns, but maybe this was black's best move developing a piece. And after b5, now comes the punish of the mistake. Now pause the video and think. Well, a lesser person might turn the bishop away, but Morphy doesn't. Morphy plays knight into b5. Good move. Morphy has three minor pieces developed as well as his queen, and he's ready to castle and get his rooks into the game. That lead in development justifies his piece sacrifice, which unleashes his remaining pieces and traps black in a crossfire at the center of the board. Well, so if bishop d3 played, which is a mistake, and that if Morphy had retreated, he would have lost the initiative, and black could have uh, developed with knight bd7, solving most of his problems. So that's why knight into b5, and then c into b5. Black should capture the knight, otherwise he has lost a pawn of nothing. Now at least he has an extra knight for his suffering. And bishop into b5 check. Morphy captures back and points the powerful bishop on b5 right at the king. So now knight bd7. Black develops the knight and blocks the check. King d8. Moving the king means that black can never castle, and white will keep bringing more pieces and harassing the white. Black queen, that black king. That's why bishop into b5, knight bd7, and then long castle. Good move. Morphy castles and places his rook on d1. He immediately threatens to win material by capturing on d7 with the rook or the bishop, as the knight on f6 is still pinned and is not a helpful defender. So now rook to d8 and then rook into d7. Good move. A brilliant move. Morphy wants to include in his last piece the rook on h1, but he displays no patience, a good habit for a player who sacrifice. Time is for the essence, and sacrifices to bring the rook to d1 as fast as possible. So now rook into d7. The knight on f6 is still pinned, so this was the only way to recapture that did not lose material. And then rook to d1. Morphy's final piece developed with another tempo move, a threat to yet again capture on d7. And now queen to e6. Black unpins the knight on f6 so that it can finally defend d7. But now bishop into d7 check. Morphy has sniffed out a checkmating idea. And then knight into d7. The only recapture which doesn't allow white to capture the black queen. And then queen to b8 check. Brilliant move. A brilliant finish. Checkmate wins the game, and chess players must not be afraid to sacrifice even the best piece, the queen, if checkmate can be forced. So knight into b8 and then rook to d8 mate. That was quick. And then checkmate. This checkmate in which the bishop defends the rook in like this is known as Morphy's mate, in memory of this opera game. Brilliant opera game. Well, this was the amazing game. Many lessons were learned from this game, but the thing that we can sacrifice our pieces sometime, we can sacrifice material sometimes to punish the opponent and grab the initiative if he makes a mistake. So this was the game. I hope you like this video, and don't forget to click the bell icon and the subscribe button. Thank you.